Hello, everyone. We will get started in about 5 minutes. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Butterfly Pavilion's Invertebrate Investigations. My name is Kayla, and I'll be your presenter today. And this month, we are talking about bugs in winter. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping things. We are in webinar mode, so you cannot turn your cameras or your microphones on. However, we do have the Q&A chat option if you have any questions during the program. If you are on a laptop or desktop computer, you will need to move your mouse up over the screen so that it pulls up the options bar on the bottom. And if you're on a tablet or a phone, you will just need to tap your screen to pull that up. And it should just have a little box with a question mark, and you can type your questions in there. And if I don't get to them right away, I promise I will get to them definitely by the end of the program. Also, we are recording this and it will be up on our YouTube channel, hopefully by the end of the day. All right, so if you are not familiar with Butterfly Pavilion, we are located in Westminster, Colorado, so just about 20 minutes north of Denver. And we are an invertebrate zoo. So invertebrates are animals without backbones. And invertebrates make up about 97% of all animal life on Earth. So while we may see a lot more vertebrates, animals with backbones, our invertebrates are very numerous, very diverse. They can be found everywhere on Earth, including right in your own backyard, or this time of year, maybe even in your house hanging out with you. So a question that we get very frequently is, where do the bugs go in winter? They're very conspicuous during the summer. They may even be a little bit pesky. But they do have cold weather strategies to help them survive. And oh, sorry, Susan, you might have missed me. My name is Kayla Manuel. I'm part of the education team here, and I'll be your educator today. Very excited to be chatting with you. And at least in the Denver area, we got our first significant snow just last week. First significant snow of the season, so it is definitely fully in winter here. It is cold and windy and not very pleasant. But our bugs, they have several strategies that can help them survive the cold weather. So the first one is a pretty self-explanatory. It's migration. Why put up with the cold weather when you can just move somewhere nicer? So lots of animals migrate for lots of different reasons. So that's going to be your seasonal movement from one habitat to another. And animals will migrate for looking for better environments, right? So looking for warmer weather or perhaps cooler weather, looking for resources such as food, space, water. And sometimes they are migrating specifically to reproduce. So perhaps there are areas that are better for raising young than where they're at. So some examples of migratory bugs in the United States, of course, monarch butterflies, right? They are very, very famous. They should all be down in Mexico now, nice and warm, snuggled up in the trees. Hopefully we're not seeing any monarchs who got left behind. And they will spend the winter down in Mexico. And spring, probably about March, they will start perking up as the weather warms up and start migrating north. So we'll see them, usually see them in the United States around April or May. If you're in Colorado, we are right on the edge of the migration, so we don't get a ton of monarchs here in Colorado. But if you are in the Southeast, the Midwest, Northeast, you probably will see a lot of monarchs. So now monarchs, they definitely get a lot of attention for their migrations, but they are not the only migratory insects that call North America home. So just some examples. Some of these are going to be more local migrations. So the American snout butterfly, for example, they're going to be very common in East Texas, Missouri, Arkansas. Not going to be seeing them in a whole lot of other places in the country, but I do really love them because they have this really interesting little snout. That actually is to help them camouflage. It's not actually their nose, but they are a migratory species that will migrate south to Mexico and Central America in the winters to stay warm. Painted lady butterflies and red admiral butterflies are also another migratory species. the European population of painted lady butterflies actually do have the longest known insect migration. They do beat out the monarchs for length. In North America, though, not quite as long. They're not traveling quite as far as the monarchs do. And then common green darner dragonflies. Again, these are going to be, you'll see them kind of along the Gulf Coast in the winters, and then they will migrate north up into kind of the Midwest, Northeast to breed, and then migrate back south when it starts getting cold again. So again, monarchs, they get a lot of attention, and for good reason. They definitely travel very far, but they are not the only ones. So where do the painted ladies go? So again, they're going to head to Mexico and Central America. So these are fairly common butterflies. We do have see quite a few of them in Colorado, but they are going to, again, head south where it's going to be a little more mild weather. All right, so sometimes you just got to pick up and leave, right? Avoid that cold weather. Even humans do that. But what do the ones who stick around do? Because we certainly see a lot more bugs than just these butterflies and these dragonflies. So they will undergo something called diapause. So diapause and hibernation are very similar, right? So the animals, their metabolism is going to decrease significantly. They're not going to be moving around or eating or drinking. And somewhere along the way, someone decided diapause was for insects and hibernation was for mammals. But another big difference is diapause can happen due to any sort of unfavorable environmental conditions. So it's not just triggered by cold weather. Diapause can also last anywhere from a few days to a few years. So unlike mammals, which are usually only going to hibernate during those cold months, so maybe 4 to 6 months, depending on where they are in the world, diapause can be very short or it can be very long, and it can also be triggered by drought, poor weather, of course, or any sort of other unfavorable conditions. So perhaps there are not enough food resources for that, and these animals can go into diapause. And diapause goes along with a couple other strategies. So some insects or invertebrates will gather in groups, right? Better to stay warm when there's lots of use. So you may see this particularly with ladybugs in the fall, right? Sometimes we end up with lots and lots of ladybugs coming into our homes. I did not see a ton this fall. I saw a few coming into my house, but not a ton. But when you start seeing that, they're just looking for a place to spend the winter. So if they're in a spot in your home where they're not going to bother you, so maybe the basement or the attic, you can't just let them be. They are going to go still into diapause, but they're all going to snuggle up warm together. So they're not going to be like messing around in your house. They're not going to be crawling around. So if they're in a space where you can just leave them, you can just let them be. Roly-polies or isopods are another. They are not insects, they're actually crustaceans related to crabs and lobsters and shrimp, but they do take the same approach. Not as common to see in your house. They're much more going to gather under rotting logs, under rocks, burrowing down in the soil and snuggling up where they can stay warm. But not all invertebrates are social creatures. In fact, a lot of them are solitary. And so you will see with a lot of your insects in particular, they can go into diapause at any point in their life cycle. So depending on the type of bug that we're looking at, they have either complete or incomplete metamorphosis. So butterflies are famous for the complete metamorphosis, that 4-stage life cycle of egg, larva, pupa, and adult, but also moths, beetles, ants, and bees will undergo this life cycle. Now, they're not quite as cute as especially monarch caterpillars, so they don't get quite as much attention for this, but they can undergo diapause at any point during this life cycle, not just as they're adults. And then we have our incomplete metamorphosis, which is a 3-stage life cycle. This is going to be your grasshoppers, your dragonflies, your cockroaches, and your mantises, where they have an egg, a nymph stage, which frequently looks very, very similar to the adults. They're just very tiny, maybe brightly colored, and then they'll have a couple of molts and they'll turn into adults. And again, they can go into diapause at any point in this life cycle. So some examples you may see are the Isabella tiger moths. So their caterpillar or their larva are the woolly bears or the woolly worms, very common to see in the fall. And they will spend the winter in their larval form. They will go into diapause. You'll see them definitely in the fall crawling around a lot trying to eat and gain as much weight as possible before they go into that diapause state. And then in the spring, when it warms up, you'll perk them up. They'll make their chrysalis, or their cocoon, I should say. And then you'll have your adult Isabella tiger moth. Now, woolly bears, there is a little bit of folklore that goes along with these cuties, that you can look at their colors and predict the weather. So this is just a myth. So the folklore goes that if the more black on their body, the harsher your winter will be. Whereas if they have more of this orangey brown coloration on their bodies, you're going to have a milder winter. Now, the coloration is only affected by at what stage they are, because they do molt multiple times while they're growing. And it can also be affected on what specific species of woolly worm or woolly bear you're looking at. So the colors aren't actually going to tell the weather. However, if you want to do your own study, please do. You can go out, check out the woolly worms, check their colors, and then see if their predictions are correct. Another Lepidoptera, we have a butterfly this time. These are black swallowtail butterflies, really beautiful, really conspicuous. They are going to spend the winters in their pupa. So the caterpillars will hatch in the late summer, early fall. And again, they will spend their time eating lots and lots of food and make their pupa or their chrysalis. And then that pupa will either be attached to a plant, and they'll spend the winter in that pupa stage. And then again in the spring, as it warms up, that'll trigger them to come out, and you'll have your beautiful black swallowtail butterflies. Now, it's not just butterflies and moths that will go into diapause. You also have your dragonflies. Now, remember when I said the nymphs of insects that undergo incomplete metamorphosis usually look like tiny versions of the adults? Dragonflies are the exception. And so the nymphs are actually fully aquatic. They will spend their entire nymph stage under the water, and they are quite the little predators. And they look a little creepy. They're maybe not the cutest. They do have very big jaws, but these are friends that you want in your pond because they are going to spend their time in the water snacking on mosquito larvae. So the more of these we have in our ponds and our lakes and our streams, the fewer mosquitoes we will have. Dragonflies can spend up to about 2 years in their nymph form, and in the winter they will either bury themselves in the mud and go into diapause, or depending on how temperate the weather is, they may stay active. So just depending on where you are in the country, how cold it gets where you're at, you may still see some activity from these little dudes, or they may burrow down into the silt of your pond and go into diapause. And also, we have our spiders. So where do spiders go? So spiders themselves, the adult spiders, they will not survive. So usually they will hatch in the spring, and they may not survive through the winter. The adults themselves will pass, but they will lay their eggs, and they're wrapped in a nice warm layer of silk, and those eggs will stay nice and warm and inactive. So you may see some egg sacs in your garage. I know I've got an egg sac that I think is from a cellar spider. The one I have pictured here is for an orb weaver spider. But again, you can just leave those egg sacs, especially if they're in a space where they're not going to be bothered. Just do know that in the spring, you may see lots and lots of little baby spiders. And then I did not put this photo in the slide, but I definitely wanted to show it to you. So let me switch my camera really quick. So praying mantises. So again, they are going to undergo incomplete metamorphosis. And the adults, again, they will probably pass at the end of the fall, but they will leave these egg cases or oothekas. Now, the reason these are very important to know about is sometimes they will lay their eggs in fir trees. And we like to bring fir trees into our homes around this time of year. So if you are someone who likes a natural Christmas tree, maybe you've had a situation like this where you bring the tree in there was a little mantis ootheca hanging out in there. They're now in your warm house, and so the babies think it's time to hatch. And now you've got 100 teeny baby mantises who are your new pets. So you can always check if you are going to do that, check your Christmas trees. You want to be careful about prying them off the branch because they are usually adhered to that. So you can always just trim the twig or the branch where they're at. And leave that outside. Otherwise, if you bring them in the house, again, you're going to have lots and lots of tiny mantises. They are very cute, but maybe not the best pet to have running around your home. So again, if you see these on your plants outside, you can just leave them. They will be perfectly fine through the winter. If you are bringing like a Christmas tree or any sort of plants inside, just check for these guys, trim off the little twigs where they're at and put them back out. And they will be perfectly fine. Now, so another question that I get frequently is how can we help the animals? How do we help them survive the winter? So there are a couple different things we can do. So for our migratory species, like our monarchs and our painted ladies, making sure that we have food plants for them. So those would be native wildflowers. Those are going to be the best. And depending on where you are in the country, is going to depend on what plants are best. Because if you're in Florida, you're going to have very, very different environment than you are in Colorado. So do some research, but having wildflowers for food is going to really help those migratory species. It'll also help like the bees and beetles and any other insects that are trying to kind of load up for the winter, trying to put on some weight so they can survive the winter. We can also provide them with shelter. So I have a bee house pictured here, but shelter can be as simple as rocks and logs. Right? It doesn't have to be a fancy little bee hotel like this. It can be just as simple as if you have a fallen log on your property and it's in a space where you can leave it, just leave it. Same with rocks and other spaces where these animals can burrow down into the soil. And they'll have safe places to spend the winter. And then another one is leave the leaves. So leaving those autumn leaves on your property, that's going to be really, really helpful for your insects as well as for your grass because it's going to provide an insulating layer for your grass and for the soil. Now, understanding that leaving a huge blanket of leaves on your property may not be the most practical thing. So if you do need to remove those, you can always just gently rake them and kind of put them off to one section of your property. And it'll provide the same function. And then usually by the spring, you'll have some nice compost that you can use for your gardening. Definitely, if you are going to do that, rakes, leaf blowers are fine. Gentle leaf blowing, but we don't want to do any sort of shredding because if we have any pupa hanging out in there or any animals who have made their winter nests in there, obviously don't want to run them through the shredder. Another thing that I didn't put on here, but is kind of important, is to leave animals where we find them. So sometimes maybe you find a caterpillar at the end of the fall, it's getting really cold. Oh no, I gotta bring it in the house. These animals, they have survived many winters. Insects have been on this planet longer than we have. They know what they're doing. And so by bringing them in our homes, we can actually kind of throw off those natural rhythms because again, it's all going to be triggered by temperature. And even potentially by the amount of sunlight. So if you find a pupa or an egg case or a caterpillar or any sort of larva, just leave them where you found them. They have a strategy. They know what they're going to do for the winter. And if you bring them in the house, one, you may end up with some baby bugs unexpectedly or baby spiders, but it is going to throw out that rhythm. So if they, emerge as an adult, especially with your pupas, butterflies, moths, and beetles tend to have fairly short lives once they reach their adult stage. And so you may end up with a pet for a couple of weeks, but they won't be able to go back outside and they won't still be around by the time the spring comes and we actually can put them outside. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. If you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the Q&A really fast and I will get those Also, it is Colorado Gives Day. So if you are in Colorado and feel so inclined, you can always drop us a donation that supports our education efforts, our research efforts, and our conservation projects that we work on around the world and here in the United States. So you can just go to our website. It's www.butterflies.org. I am working on the schedule for invertebrate investigations for 2026. Hopefully we'll have that out in the next couple of weeks, so do keep an eye on our website. I am going to keep these free, as always. Might be changing up the format a little bit, might be moving to YouTube live streaming. Not quite sure what that looks like yet, but do keep an eye on our website. And I have some really exciting themes for 2026 that I'm looking forward to chatting with you about. So if there are no more questions, I know, let's see, we got Susan's on where the painted ladies go. If there's anything else, go ahead and drop those in. Otherwise, I will wrap it up. Do check out our YouTube channel as well. This recording will be up there hopefully by the end of the day, and you can catch up on previous episodes of Invertebrate Investigations there as well as check out our awesome content. And I don't see any more questions, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you all so much for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I hope to see you in 2026. Bye.